HELLS Angels helps Black woman find her child. What happens next? Shocked. A Black woman's child is taken, and no one believes her cries for help. Desperate, broke, and alone on a deserted highway, she's ready to give up, until the last people anyone expected pull over beside her. The roaring engines stop, and out steps a gang of HELLS Angels. Everyone tells her to run, but instead, they offer to help. Now this grieving mother is riding with outlaws, across 3 states, chasing her stolen son and fighting a past darker than she can imagine. But as the trail leads deep into the desert, she discovers something she never saw coming. The danger isn't just from the men who took her boy. It's from the ones riding beside her. What happens when the only people who can save your child are the ones you were taught to fear? And when the truth finally comes out, will it save them all or destroy them forever? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The Atlanta sun beat down mercilessly as Denise Carter changed the sheets in room 212 of the Mountain View Motel. Sweat trickled down her back, but her movements remained precise and efficient. Corners tucked tight, pillows fluffed just right. She'd been doing this job for 3 years now, and her hands knew the routine by heart. A small smile crossed her face as she thought about Malik. Her 6-year-old son would be getting out of school soon, probably already excited to show her his latest artwork. That boy and his motorcycles. Every drawing covered in wheels and chrome, each one precious enough to hang on their small apartment's refrigerator. The cleaning cart squeaked as she pushed it down the outdoor corridor, her mind already on the chicken nuggets she'd promised to make for dinner. That's when her phone buzzed in her pocket. Mrs. Thompson from next door. "Denise?" The elderly woman's voice quivered. "Deshaun came by the apartment about an hour ago. He took Malik." The world tilted sideways. Denise gripped the cart handle to steady herself. "What do you mean, took him?" He said something about a weekend visit. Malik seemed excited to see his daddy. Mrs. Thompson's voice faded into background noise as panic clawed at Denise's chest. "Deshaun, after 3 years of nothing, no calls, no child support, not even a birthday card, he just shows up and takes their son?" The cleaning supplies clattered as Denise abandoned her cart, already running toward the manager's office. "Family emergency," she gasped out to Mr. Peterson, who took one look at her face and nodded. Her feet carried her to the bus stop, each minute feeling like an hour as she waited for the number 47 to arrive. The ride to Deshaun's apartment complex passed in a blur of worried prayers and unanswered phone calls. His number, disconnected for years, still gave the same automated message. Denise's hands shook as she climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Deshaun!" she pounded on his door. "Deshaun, open up! Where's my baby?" The door creaked open under her fist, unlocked and slightly ajar. The sight inside stopped her cold. Empty. Completely empty. No furniture, no pictures on the walls, not even a stray piece of mail on the floor. The afternoon light filtered through bare windows, illuminating nothing but dust motes dancing in the air. The apartment smelled of cleaning supplies, recently scrubbed to remove all traces of life. Denise walked through each room, calling Malik's name, though she already knew she wouldn't find him. In the kitchen, a single crayon lay forgotten in the corner. Red, Malik's favorite color. She picked it up, clutching it in her trembling fingers as tears began to fall. The police station was worse than the empty apartment. Officer Bradley sat behind his desk, typing with 2 fingers as Denise tried to make him understand. "Ma'am, if he's the biological father and there's no custody order in place, Technically, it's not kidnapping. He didn't even look up from his computer screen. It's a civil matter. He hasn't seen Malik in 3 years. Denise's voice rose, drawing looks from other officers. He doesn't have a job, a home. He's not stable. My baby needs his medicine, his inhaler. Please. Officer Bradley finally met her eyes, his expression a practiced mix of sympathy and dismissal. We'll put out a notice to be on the lookout, see what we can do. But without evidence of immediate danger. Denise left the station as the sun was setting, her feet carrying her home on autopilot. The apartment felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. Malik's backpack still sat by the door where he'd dropped it after school, his half-finished drawing of a motorcycle with flames on the side, laying on the coffee table. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching his things. The dinosaur sheets on his bed were still rumpled from mourning. His favorite cereal box sat open on the kitchen counter. The inhaler he needed for his asthma was still in the bathroom cabinet. The one Deshawn didn't even know about because he'd never been around when Malik had an attack. Thunder rumbled outside as Denise sank onto the front porch steps, clutching Malik's jean jacket to her chest. It still smelled like him, like crayons and the strawberry shampoo he insisted on using. The first drops of rain began to fall, pattering against the worn wooden steps. Her mind raced through possibilities. Deshawn's old friends, his family members, places he used to hang out. But 3 years was a long time. People moved, changed numbers, disappeared into the sprawl of Atlanta. The police wouldn't help. She had no money for a private investigator. But she had something stronger than all of that. A mother's love and determination. The rain fell harder now, soaking through her motel uniform. But Denise barely noticed. She pressed her face into Malik's jacket and whispered, her voice fierce despite her tears. "I'm coming for you, baby. Mama's coming." Inside, she moved with renewed purpose. A small duffel bag emerged from the closet. Basic clothes went in first, then her savings, $623 hidden in an envelope behind Malik's baby pictures. Her phone charger, a bottle of water, Malik's spare inhaler. The photo of him from his last birthday, gap-toothed smile beaming at the camera as he held up his new art supplies. Denise changed out of her wet uniform into jeans and a sturdy sweater, laced up her most comfortable shoes. The rain continued to pour outside as she stood in the doorway, taking one last look at the apartment she and Malik had made into a home. Then she stepped out into the storm, pulling the door closed behind her. The streets of Atlanta stretched out before her, somewhere in their maze of concrete and steel holding her son. She would find him. She had to. The sound of her footsteps was lost in the drumming of the rain as she walked away from everything familiar toward the unknown. But with each step, her resolve strengthened. Malik was out there, probably scared, definitely needing his mama. And Denise Carter would walk through fire to bring him home. The night enveloped her as she moved through the rain-slicked streets, her son's jacket tucked safely in her bag, her heart beating out a steady rhythm. Find him. Find him. Find him. The sun was setting on Denise's second day of searching, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that she barely noticed. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, and her stomach growled with a persistence she couldn't ignore anymore. The diner's neon sign flickered ahead. Betty's place. A beacon of warmth against the growing darkness. 2 days of thumbing rides from strangers had left her exhausted. She'd dozed fitfully at bus stops, jolting awake at every sound, clutching her bag close. Vending machine chips and candy bars had been her only meals. The $600 she'd started with was down to less than $200, spent on bus tickets that led nowhere and phone calls that went unanswered. The bell above the diner's door chimed as Denise pushed it open. Warm air wrapped around her, carrying the scent of coffee and fried food. A few truckers hunched over their plates at the counter, and an elderly couple occupied a booth near the window. Denise slid into a booth in the corner, as far from the door as possible. "Coffee, hun?" A waitress with graying hair and kind eyes appeared with a pot in hand. "Yes, please." Denise's voice was hoarse from 2 days of asking questions about a man and boy no one had seen. She ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, toast and eggs, and pulled out the stack of flyers she'd made at a copy shop. Malik's smile beamed up at her from the grainy photo, his missing front tooth making him look even younger than 6 years old. The roar of motorcycles shattered the diner's quiet. Denise's head snapped up as the parking lot filled with chrome and leather. HELLS angels, their patches visible even through the window's reflection. Her heart rate quickened as she remembered stories about outlaw bikers, none of them good. They filed in like a leather-clad wave, 8 men with weathered faces and hard eyes. Their boots thudded against the linoleum floor, and their voices filled the small space. Denise hunched lower in her seat, turning the coffee cup in her hands, trying to make herself invisible. The bikers claimed the larger tables near the center of the diner, ordering with the familiarity of regulars. Their laughter boomed off the walls, making Denise flinch. She kept her eyes down, counting the minutes until she could leave. Heavy footsteps approached her table. A large figure passed, and suddenly her coffee cup wobbled, dark liquid sloshing over the rim onto her carefully arranged flyers. Denise gasped, grabbing for napkins. "I'm sorry, ma'am." The voice was unexpectedly gentle, coming from somewhere above her. "Let me help with that." Denise looked up and up into the face of one of the bikers. He was older than the others, maybe in his late 40s, with gray threading through his beard and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. His leather vest bore patches indicating he was a former Marine. "It's fine," she whispered, but he was already helping her blot the coffee from the papers. His movements were careful, almost delicate for such large hands. He paused as he noticed what the papers were. "Missing child?" His voice was quiet enough that only she could hear. Denise pulled the flyers closer, protective. The biker, his vest patch read "Tank," stayed where he was, his expression soft with concern. "My son," she found herself saying. "His father. He took him. 2 days ago." Tank's weathered face grew serious. "Police?" "They said it's just a custody dispute." Bitterness crept into her voice. "Said they'd see what they could do?" By now, the other bikers had noticed their leader's absence. The diner grew quieter as they turned to watch. Tank pulled up a chair, his movements slow and non-threatening. "Tell me," he said simply. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was something in his calm, steady gaze that made her feel, for the first time in 2 days, that someone was really listening. The words poured out of her. About Deshawn's sudden appearance after 3 years. About Malik's asthma. About the empty apartment and the useless police and the endless road that seemed to lead nowhere. The other bikers drifted closer as she spoke, their faces growing serious. The waitress stopped to refill coffee cups, her eyes wide as she listened. When Denise finished, silence filled the diner. Tank studied the flyer for a long moment, his finger tracing the outline of Malik's face. Something passed through his eyes. Pain, maybe, or memory. "We'll ride with you." Denise wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. "What?" "We'll help you find him." Tank's voice was firm. He looked around at his fellow bikers, who nodded their agreement. "We've got contacts, people who owe us favors, eyes and ears in places the police won't look." The waitress nearly dropped her coffee pot. Denise stared at Tank, trying to process his words. "Why?" she finally managed. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Tank was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "Because once, someone helped me when I didn't deserve it." The simple sincerity in his voice brought fresh tears to Denise's eyes. She looked around at the circle of leather-clad men, seeing them with new eyes, not as threats, but as unexpected angels in disguise. Her hands trembled as she smoothed out one of the flyers. "I don't have much money," she admitted. "I can't pay you." A ghost of a smile crossed Tank's face. "We're not asking for payment, ma'am. Just the chance to do some good in this world." The elderly couple in the window booth were openly staring now. The truckers at the counter had turned on their stools to watch. The waitress stood frozen, coffee pot forgotten in her hand. Tank stood up, his full height impressive but no longer intimidating. "Finish your meal," he said gently. "We'll make some calls, start putting the word out. Then we'll figure out where to start looking." The other bikers were already pulling out phones, moving with purpose. Their voices were quieter now, serious, professional. Tank laid a business card on her table, clean, simple, with just a name and number. "Tank Malone," she read aloud. "Ex-Marine," he said. "Now I just try to help where I can." He gestured to the card. "Keep that close. You're not alone anymore, Miss Carter." Denise picked up the card, running her thumb over the embossed letters. For the first time in 2 days, hope flickered in her chest. Small but steady, like a candle in the darkness. The waitress finally remembered herself and hurried forward with fresh coffee. "On the house," she insisted, filling Denise's cup. Her hands shook slightly as she poured coffee for Tank and his men. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the diner's parking lot as Tank organized his men with military precision. Denise watched in amazement as the group of bikers, who had seemed so intimidating just hours ago, transformed into a focused search team. "Bobby, hit the truck stops heading west. Show Malik's picture to every driver you meet," Tank directed, his voice steady and sure. "Mike and Ray, take the rest stops. Someone must have seen something." The bikers roared off in different directions, leather vests gleaming in the sunlight. Tank turned to Denise. "Ma'am, if you're willing, I've got a pickup truck that'll be more comfortable than the bike. We can follow the others." Denise nodded, clutching her small bag. The waitress hurried out with a stack of freshly printed flyers, still warm from the diner's office printer. "I made copies," she said, pressing them into Denise's hands. "And I called my cousin who works at the truck stop in Birmingham. She'll keep an eye out." They spent the next few hours plastering flyers across 3 towns. Every gas station, every convenience store, every bulletin board soon carried Malik's smiling face. Tank's network of bikers proved extensive. They called contacts at mechanics shops, bars, and roadhouses across 4 states. Late in the afternoon, Tank's phone rang. His face grew serious as he listened. "Got it, thanks, brother." He turned to Denise. "One of our guys in Louisiana spotted someone matching Deshawn's description at a gas station yesterday. Had a young boy with him." Denise's heart leaped. "Malik?" "Description fits. They were heading west." Within minutes, they were on the road. Tank's black pickup led a thundering procession of motorcycles. Denise sat in the passenger seat, watching the countryside blur past. The truck's interior smelled of leather and motor oil, but it was immaculately clean. "Your friends?" she said after a while. "They dropped everything to help. Why?" Tank kept his eyes on the road. "Most of us have been lost ourselves, one way or another. Veterans who couldn't shake the war, addicts who found the bottom, Ex-cons trying to make things right. He glanced at her. Helping folks like you, it's how we stay straight. Gives us purpose. As the sun set, they made camp near the Mississippi border. The bikers set up tents with practiced efficiency, and soon a campfire blazed in the gathering darkness. Denise sat on a log, watching the flames dance as the men shared coffee and quiet conversation. One by one, they told their stories. Mike had been a Marine medic, haunted by what he'd seen. Ray was 5 years clean after hitting rock bottom. Bobby had done time for assault before finding God in prison. Their honesty touched something deep in Denise's heart. Tank sat nearby, quietly attentive. At one point, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small, well-worn Bible. The leather cover was soft with age, the pages marked with notes and highlights. "You're religious?" Denise asked, surprised. Tank smiled slightly. "I ain't perfect," he said, his voice gentle. "But God don't wait for perfect folks to do his work." He handed her the Bible. "Sometimes he uses the broken ones, gives us a chance to heal by helping others heal." Denise ran her fingers over the worn cover, seeing these men in a new light. There was something sacred in their rough kindness, something holy in their determination to do good. These weren't the angels she'd imagined in Sunday school, but maybe they were angels all the same, scarred, imperfect, but devoted to their mission. The night grew deep. One by one, the bikers retired to their tents. Denise stayed by the fire, watching the embers glow. Tank kept vigil nearby, his presence steady and reassuring. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, Tank's phone buzzed. He answered it, listening intently. His expression darkened. "What is it?" Denise asked, her heart racing. "Got word from a contact out west," Tank said slowly. "Malik was seen near a commune in New Mexico." He hesitated. "It's run by a man named Colt Brewer, former HELLS Angel." "Is that bad?" Tank's jaw tightened. "Colt's dangerous. Left the Angels years ago when even they wouldn't stomach what he was doing." He met her eyes. "But we'll find Malik. I promise you that." Denise saw the determination in his face, felt the quiet strength in his words. These men, these unlikely angels, had given her hope when she'd had none. Whatever lay ahead, she wasn't alone anymore. The sun rose over the Mississippi border, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The bikers began to stir, breaking down camp with quiet efficiency. Their motorcycles gleamed in the morning light, ready for the long road ahead. Denise watched them, these rough men with gentle hearts, and said a silent prayer of thanks. Tank stood nearby, checking his phone for updates. His weathered face was set with purpose, his eyes scanning the horizon. Whatever dangers waited in New Mexico, whatever darkness Colt Brewer represented, they would face it together. For now, that was enough. The morning sun cast long shadows across their makeshift camp as Tank shared the news about Colt Brewer. The other bikers grew quiet, exchanging worried glances. Big Mike, a burly man with graying hair, was the first to speak up. "Colt Brewer? Man, that's bad business, Tank. Real bad." He shook his head slowly. "You know what happened to the last folks who crossed him?" Ray, sitting nearby, nodded grimly. "That commune of his ain't no hippie camp. Word is people go in, but they don't always come out." The tension around the dying campfire was thick enough to cut. Denise looked from face to face, her heart sinking as she saw the fear in their eyes. These men, who'd seemed so brave just hours before, now appeared shaken. "We can't just walk away," Tank said firmly, his voice cutting through the murmurs of concern. "There's a child involved." Bobby, the youngest of the group, cleared his throat. "Tank, I respect you, brother, but Colt's got an army out there. We'd be walking into a hornet's nest." Tank stood up slowly, his tall frame casting a shadow over the fire. 20 years ago, I rode with Colt. I saw what he became. I watched him cross lines that no man should cross. His voice grew heavy with regret. I walked away then, told myself it wasn't my problem. He paused, looking each man in the eye. I won't make that mistake again, not with a child's life at stake. Denise rose to her feet. "Please," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "I can't lose my boy. I'll go alone if I have to, but I'm going." The bikers shifted uncomfortably, but Tank put a steady hand on her shoulder. "You won't go alone." One by one, the men began to nod. Big Mike sighed heavily. "Well, can't let you two face that snake pit by yourselves." He stood up, joints creaking. "I'm in." "Me too," Ray said, getting to his feet. Bobby looked around at his brothers, then shrugged. "Guess we're all crazy together." They spent the morning preparing for the journey west. The bikes needed maintenance before the long desert ride. Tank supervised as the men changed oil, checked chains, and topped off fluids. Denise helped where she could, passing tools and learning the names of parts she'd never known existed. As the sun climbed higher, they packed their gear with military precision. Tank showed Denise how to properly secure her backpack to the truck's bed. "Desert's unforgiving," he explained. "We need to be ready for anything." They set out just before noon, a line of gleaming motorcycles following Tank's black pickup. The highways stretched endlessly before them, cutting through small towns that seemed to grow smaller and more isolated with each passing mile. Every morning, as the sun painted the sky pink, Denise would find a quiet spot away from camp. She'd kneel in the dirt, closing her eyes in prayer. "Lord, protect my boy," she'd whisper. "Guide us to him. Keep him safe until we get there." At first, the bikers kept their distance during these moments, but one morning, Big Mike quietly joined her. Then Ray. Soon, all of them were gathering in a rough circle at dawn, heads bowed as Denise prayed. Even those who hadn't prayed in years found comfort in the ritual. They stopped only for fuel and food, pushing west through Texas. The terrain grew increasingly harsh, the towns more scattered. At night, they camped under vast skies filled with more stars than Denise had ever seen. It was during one such night, as the others slept, that Denise finally broke down. She sat alone at the edge of camp, silent tears streaming down her face. Tank found her there, staring into the darkness. "What if we're too late?" she whispered. "What if I never see him again?" Tank settled beside her, his weathered face thoughtful in the starlight. "Let me tell you about my daughter, Sarah," he said quietly. "She was 8 when I went to prison. Beautiful little girl, always laughing." Denise turned to look at him, seeing the pain etched in his features. "I wrote her letters every week," he continued, "but her mother, she was angry, kept sending them back unopened. Then Sarah got sick. Cancer." His voice caught. "By the time I found out, she was gone. I never got to say goodbye." "I'm so sorry," Denise whispered. "You don't stop being a parent just because you can't hold your kid," Tank said, his voice rough with emotion. "That love, that responsibility, it stays with you, and sometimes it gives you the strength to do what needs doing." They sat in silence for a long moment, sharing the weight of loss and hope. The next morning, they crossed the New Mexico state line. The landscape had transformed into red rocks and endless sky, beautiful but unforgiving. The group pulled over at the "Welcome to New Mexico" sign, gathering in a tight circle. Tank looked at each face in turn, the ex-cons, the veterans, the addicts, all united by a common purpose. "What we're about to do," he said solemnly, "it ain't just about justice, It's about redemption, for all of us. We bring the boy home, Big Mike said firmly. No matter what it takes, Ray added. No matter the cost, Bobby echoed. Denise stood among them, feeling their strength become her own. These men, who'd started as strangers, had become her family, her angels. They mounted their bikes and truck, the engines roaring to life in the desert silence. Ahead lay uncertainty and danger, but they faced it together. United by a sacred oath, bring Malik home or die trying. As they rode deeper into New Mexico, the sun beat down mercilessly, but Denise felt a fierce hope burning in her heart. With these unlikely angels by her side, she would find her son. She had to believe that. It was all she had left. The small desert town of Broken Ridge seemed to materialize out of nowhere, a collection of weathered buildings shimmering in the heat. Paint peeled from storefronts and tumbleweeds gathered in doorways. The bikers rolled into town just as the sun reached its peak, their engines echoing off empty streets. Looks like time forgot this place, Ray muttered as they pulled into the Dusty Rose Motel's cracked parking lot. The neon sign buzzed weakly, missing several letters. Tank gathered everyone in room 12, spreading a local map across the rickety table. We need eyes and ears everywhere, he said, his finger tracing possible routes. Bobby, you and Mike check the gas stations. Ray, hit the diners. I'll work the local bars. Denise sat on the edge of the bed, clutching her phone. I'll start calling shelters, she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Someone must have seen something. Tank nodded, his eyes softening. Remember, we're looking for info about Colt's people too. Any whispers about the commune, any strangers passing through. The angels dispersed, leaving Denise alone in the quiet room. She opened her notebook, filled with numbers for every shelter and church within 50 miles. Her fingers dialed the first number. Hours crawled by. The air conditioner wheezed, barely cutting through the afternoon heat. Call after call led nowhere. No one had seen a little boy matching Malik's description. No reports of a man like Deshawn. He's an artist, Denise would say, her voice growing hoarse. Loves drawing motorcycles, always has a sketchbook with him. But the answers remained the same. Sorry, ma'am. We'll keep an eye out. The sun was setting when Tank returned, his heavy boots announcing his presence before he knocked. Denise opened the door to find him looking grimmer than usual. Got something? He said, stepping inside. Colt's people were at Martinez Market yesterday. Loaded up on supplies, food, batteries, camping gear. Enough for at least 20 people. Denise's heart thundered in her chest. 20? She whispered. Why would they need so much? Tank's jaw tightened. Nothing good, he said quietly. Colt's building something out there, something bigger than before. The other angels filtered back, bringing their own pieces of intelligence. Bobby had heard about trucks moving at night. Ray found a waitress who'd served men with familiar tattoos, Colt's old crew markings. They decided to watch the dirt road leading to the compound. It was the only way in or out, snaking through the desert like a serpent's trail. They took shifts, parking at different vantage points, noting every vehicle that passed. 2 days stretched like taffy in the desert heat. Denise stayed at the motel, coordinating their movements, still making calls. The waiting felt like torture, but she knew rushing in blind would be worse. On the second evening, she stood on the motel's second-floor balcony, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of fire. Tank joined her, his presence solid and reassuring. I used to cross the street when I saw men like you, Denise admitted softly, not looking at him. Thought all bikers were dangerous, violent. Tank leaned against the railing, considering her words. Can't blame you for that, he said. Plenty of us earned that fear. Spent years earning it myself. What changed? Hit bottom. Lost everything that mattered. Then found something bigger than myself. He paused, watching a hawk circle overhead. Sometimes the loudest thunder brings the most rain. Denise turned to look at him then. Really look at him. The setting sun caught the silver in his beard, the lines around his eyes that spoke of both hardship and laughter. She saw beyond the leather and tattoos to the man beneath, someone who'd walked through darkness and chosen light. Something shifted between them in that moment. Neither spoke of it, but both felt it, a connection deeper than circumstance, more delicate than friendship. It hung in the air like desert lightning, powerful and uncertain. They stood there until the stars emerged, each lost in thought. Below, the other angels moved through their evening routines, checking bikes, sharing cigarettes, planning tomorrow's watch. But up here, time seemed suspended. "We'll find him," Tank said finally, his voice carrying the weight of a promise. Denise nodded, allowing herself to draw strength from his certainty. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and dust, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the rising moon. The depth of her trust in these men, in Tank especially, should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like finding solid ground after weeks of falling. They weren't just her son's rescuers anymore. They were her family, forged in the crucible of shared purpose and unwavering faith. As night settled fully over the desert, they remained on the balcony, their silence more eloquent than words. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent, while below, a group of unlikely angels kept their vigil, waiting for the moment to bring a lost child home. The eastern sky turned from black to purple as Tank gathered the angels around their bikes. Dawn's first light crept across the desert floor, casting long shadows behind the cacti and scrub brush. The air was crisp, carrying the lingering chill of night. "Remember," Tank said, his voice low and steady, "we're not just saving one boy today. What Colt's doing out there?" He shook his head, jaw tight. "It ends now." The angels worked methodically, removing mufflers from their bikes. The sound of metal on metal echoed in the pre-dawn quiet. They packed first aid kits into saddlebags, checked rope coils, and made sure their burner phones were charged. Denise stood by a borrowed pickup truck, her heart racing. 2 angels, Bobby and Ray, would stay with her, keeping the engine running for a quick escape. She watched Tank checking his gear one last time, his movements precise and controlled. "Tank," she called softly. He turned, and she saw the warrior beneath the man, focused, ready. "Be careful." He nodded once, then swung onto his bike. The others followed suit, engines roaring to life in the desert silence. The sound was deafening without the mufflers, exactly as planned. They wanted to be heard coming. The convoy split up. Tank led the main group toward the compound, while Bobby drove Denise and Ray in the truck, taking a longer route to approach from the back. The rising sun painted everything in shades of gold and red as they bounced along dirt roads. Through binoculars, Denise watched the compound come into view. A chain-link fence surrounded a cluster of trailers and makeshift buildings. Armed men patrolled the perimeter, their rifles glinting in the morning light. "Sweet Jesus," Ray whispered, spotting something through his own binoculars. "There's kids out there." Denise's hands shook as she focused her lenses. Small figures moved between the buildings, carrying water buckets. They looked thin, their movements wary like scared animals. The thunder of motorcycles grew louder. Tank's group appeared on the main road, the noise of their unmuffled bikes echoing off the desert rocks. The guards turned, raising their weapons. Tank led the Angels straight at the gate. At the last second, they split into two groups, circling the compound like wolves. The guards couldn't track them all at once. In the confusion, Tank and three others cut through a weak spot in the fence. From their hidden position, Denise watched the chaos unfold. More men poured from the buildings, but the Angels' strategy was working. The roar of bikes, the multiple directions of attack. It overwhelmed the guards' ability to respond effectively. Tank's group reached the central area. They moved with military precision, disarming the nearest guards. Years of hard living had made these men tough, and years of redemption had given them purpose. They were unstoppable. There! Denise's heart nearly stopped. Through the truck's window, she spotted a small figure stumbling out of a trailer. Barefoot, crying, familiar. Malik! Bobby grabbed her arm before she could jump out. Wait, he urged. Not yet. Two more figures emerged from the main building. Even at this distance, Denise recognized Tank's broad shoulders. Beside him stood a leaner man with long gray hair, Colt Brewer. The two men faced each other as chaos swirled around them. Colt's voice carried across the compound, dripping with contempt. You turned saint now, brother? Tank stood his ground, solid as a mountain. Just doing what we should have done a long time ago. Colt moved first, fast despite his age. The punch connected with Tank's jaw, but Tank had been expecting it. He absorbed the blow and countered decades of street fighting experience behind his fist. More children emerged from the trailers, some with their hands still bound. The Angels worked quickly to free them, shepherding them toward safety. Denise couldn't wait any longer. As Tank and Colt fought, she sprinted toward Malik. Her son saw her and ran, crying, "Mama, Mama!" Gunshots cracked through the morning air. Someone was firing from one of the buildings. The Angels returned fire, providing cover as children fled. Denise scooped Malik into her arms, feeling his thin body shake with sobs. I got you, baby, she whispered. Mama's got you. Bobby appeared beside them, shielding them with his bulk. Move, he shouted. Back to the truck. More shots rang out. Angels on bikes roared past, drawing fire away from the escaping children. Through tears, Denise saw Tank land a devastating right hook that sent Colt sprawling. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Someone had called the police. Probably the same person who'd helped set this rescue in motion. The sound spurred everyone into faster action. Tank! Denise screamed. We have to go. He delivered one final blow to Colt, then turned and ran. The Angels mounted their bikes in practiced motion, their formation protecting the truck as it carried precious cargo to safety. Denise held Malik close in the truck's back seat as they sped away, desert dust billowing behind them. Other vehicles followed, carrying more rescued children. In her rearview mirror, she saw the Angels bringing up the rear, their bikes still thundering defiance at the compound they'd just raided. The sirens grew louder as police cars passed them, heading toward the compound. But the Angels knew these back roads well. They would be long gone before anyone could follow. Malik trembled in her arms, his face buried in her shoulder. He smelled of dust and fear, but he was alive. He was safe. Denise rocked him gently as Bobby drove, whispering, It's okay now, baby. We're going home. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a sea of light. Behind them, justice was, finally catching up to Colt Brewer. Ahead lay the long road home, but they would travel it together, this unlikely family of saints and sinners, bound by love and redemption. The caravan of vehicles pushed through the night, their headlights cutting through the darkness of New Mexico's back roads. Denise held Malik close in the truck's back seat, feeling every bump and turn as Bobby navigated the unfamiliar terrain. Her son hadn't spoken a word since their escape, but his grip on her shirt never loosened. Tank's voice crackled over the radio. 2 miles ahead, Whitechapel on the left. The church appeared like a ghost in their headlights, a simple wooden structure with peeling paint and a crooked cross atop its steeple. Pastor Michael Wheeler stood in the doorway, his weathered face grave but kind. Tank had called ahead, and the old minister hadn't hesitated to offer sanctuary. "Bring them inside," Pastor Wheeler whispered, ushering them through the door. "Quickly now." The rescued children huddled together in the church basement, wrapped in blankets the pastor's wife had gathered. Some cried softly. Others stared with hollow eyes that had seen too much. Denise's heart ached for them all. "Mama," Malik whispered, his first word since the rescue. "Don't let go." "Never again, baby." She kissed his forehead, tasting dust and dried tears. "Never again." The angels collapsed in various corners of the basement, their adrenaline finally giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. Bobby kept watch at the window while others tended to minor injuries from the fight. Denise noticed Tank wincing as he shrugged off his leather jacket. "You're hurt," she said, moving closer with Malik still in her arms. "Just a graze." Tank tried to wave her off, but she could see the blood seeping through his shirt sleeve. "Pastor," she called softly, "do you have a first aid kit?" The minister's wife brought supplies, and Denise sat beside Tank. Malik watched with wide eyes as she cleaned the wound. A bullet had carved a shallow path across Tank's bicep. "You're good at this," Tank murmured as she worked. "Lots of practice patching up skinned knees," she replied, careful to keep her touch gentle. "Though this is my first bullet wound." "Hopefully your last." His attempt at a smile faded as Pastor Wheeler descended the stairs, his face grim. "You need to see this," the pastor said, holding up his tablet. The news was already spreading, but not the truth they'd lived. Headlines screamed across screens. "Outlaw biker gang raids religious commune." "Children abducted in violent attack." "Former convicts return to crime." Photos of Tank and the other angels, pulled from old arrest records, accompanied stories that painted them as monsters. Colt Brewer, somehow already speaking to reporters, portrayed himself as a peaceful religious leader whose community had been attacked by violent criminals. "They're turning it all around," Bobby growled, "making us the bad guys." "The police will be looking everywhere," Pastor Wheeler warned. "They'll find you eventually." Denise grabbed Tank's arm. "You have to go, all of you. Get on your bikes and run." But Tank shook his head, his expression set. "If we run, they'll call us guilty. Those kids will end up back there, or somewhere worse." "They'll destroy you," Denise's voice cracked. "After everything you've done, everything you've changed." "Some things are worth the cost." Tank looked at Malik, then at the other children sleeping fitfully in their makeshift beds. "Better me than them." As if summoned by their fears, red and blue lights began flashing through the church windows. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "They're here," Bobby announced grimly. Pastor Wheeler wrung his hands. "What should we do?" Tank stood, his decision already made. "Get the children upstairs. Hide them in the church proper. It'll look better if they're found in a house of God rather than a basement." The angels helped shepherd the kids up the narrow stairs. Denise carried Malik, who had started trembling again. Through the front windows, they could see police cars surrounding the building. "Tank, please," Denise tried one last time. "There has to be another way." He touched her cheek with calloused fingers. "Sometimes the only way forward is through the fire." Then he turned to Malik and knelt down. "You take care of your mama, okay, little man?" Malik nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Stay inside," Tank ordered everyone. Then he walked out the front door with his hands raised. Denise held Malik as they watched through the window. Police officers swarmed forward, weapons drawn. Tank went to his knees, accepting the rough handling as they cuffed his hands behind his back. One by one, the other angels followed his lead, surrendering themselves to protect the children they'd rescued. The officers led them to waiting patrol cars, reading rights and tightening handcuffs. Malik pressed his face against the glass. "They're taking them away," he whispered. "The good guys." Denise hugged him tighter, her own tears falling freely now. Through the window, she watched Tank being placed in the back of a police car. Just before they closed the door, he looked up at the church, his expression peaceful despite everything. "You saved him," Denise whispered, holding her son close while watching Tank disappear into the night. "Now I'll save you." The police cars pulled away, sirens silent now, taking with them the men who had risked everything to rescue a little boy and found themselves saving many more. In the church, surrounded by the children they'd freed, Denise knew this wasn't the end. The truth would have to be told, no matter what it cost. She owed Tank and the angels that much, and so much more. Pastor Wheeler touched her shoulder gently. "What will you do now?" Denise straightened her spine, still holding Malik close. The morning sun was beginning to peek through the church windows, painting the worn wooden pews with stripes of gold. Dawn was breaking, and with it came the first glimmer of how she would fight back, not with fists or fury, but with truth and testimony. The children around them were living proof of what had really happened at the compound. Each one had a story that needed to be told. Each one was evidence of both the darkness they'd escaped and the light that had saved them. Tank and the angels had given them their freedom. Now it was her turn to give them justice. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Denise blinked awake, her neck stiff from sleeping upright. Beside her, Malik was curled up like a cat, his small hand clutching her shirt even in sleep. The events of the previous night crashed over her like a wave. The arrests, the sirens, Tank's peaceful surrender. She carefully shifted Malik's head onto her jacket, making a pillow for him. Other children were scattered throughout the church, some with parents who'd already arrived to claim them, others still waiting. The morning news played quietly on Pastor Wheeler's small television in the corner, showing mugshots of Tank and the angels alongside sensationalized headlines. Denise's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. The battery was low, but she had enough charge to start making calls. She began with local news stations, her voice growing stronger with each attempt. "Please, just listen," she told one reporter after another. "These men aren't kidnappers. They're heroes. They saved my son. They saved all these children." Most hung up. Some laughed. A few took notes but seemed skeptical. By mid-morning, her throat was raw from explaining, defending, pleading. Pastor Wheeler brought her a cup of coffee and a sympathetic smile. "Don't give up," he said, sitting beside her. "Truth has a way of rising to the surface." Denise nodded, scrolling through her contacts. During their journey across the country, they'd stopped at numerous churches and shelters. She'd kept business cards, names, numbers, anything that might help. Now she dialed each one. The breakthrough came just after lunch. A pastor in Mississippi remembered them clearly. "Oh yes," he said, his voice warm through the phone. "That group stopped here. They joined our morning prayers. The big fellow, Tank, was it? He quoted scripture with me. And that precious little boy of yours drew pictures for our bulletin board. Would you—" Denise's heart raced. "Would you be willing to tell that to the media?" "Child, I'll do better than that. I'll go on air myself." True to his word, by that afternoon, Reverend Jackson was speaking on a local news channel. These weren't outlaws causing trouble, he testified. These were God-fearing men helping a mother find her son. They stopped to pray with us. They helped fix our church van. That's not the behavior of kidnappers. Denise watched the interview on Pastor Wheeler's television, hope blooming in her chest. Malik sat in her lap, finally eating more than just a few bites of food. That's where I drew the motorcycles, he said softly, recognizing the church in the background. That's right, baby. She hugged him closer. And we're going to make sure everyone knows the truth. With Reverend Jackson's interview gaining traction, Denise launched into action. She created social media accounts, naming her campaign Angels for Children. Using Pastor Wheeler's computer, she posted videos of herself and Malik telling their story. She interviewed other parents as they arrived, recording their testimonies about how their children had been lured or taken to Colt's compound. He promised my daughter a modeling career, one mother sobbed on camera. Said she'd be famous. Then he took her and I never heard from her again until now. My son was grabbed from a park, another father shared. Police said he was probably a runaway, but these bikers, these angels, they found him. They brought him back to me. The stories spread. Local news became regional news. Small online posts became viral videos. Denise worked tirelessly, stopping only to care for Malik and catch a few hours of sleep. 3 days after the arrests, she finally got permission to visit Tank at the county jail. Malik stayed with Pastor Wheeler while she drove to the facility, her heart pounding as she was led through security. Tank looked smaller somehow behind the thick glass, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to his usual leather. But his eyes were clear and calm as he picked up the phone to speak with her. "You look tired, Dee," he said gently. "I've been busy." She pressed her hand against the glass. "We're fighting for you. All of you. People are starting to listen. I saw some of it on the TV in here." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You're quite the crusader. The truth is coming out. Colt's lies are falling apart. More families are coming forward, telling how he took their children. We just need more time." Tank nodded slowly. "Just remember what I told you. Don't fight hate with hate, Dee. Fight it with truth." "I will." Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. "I'm not stopping until you're free, all of you. You saved my son, Tank. You saved all those children. I won't let them paint you as the villains." "You're stronger than you know," he said softly. "Stronger than any of us." Their time was cut short by a guard's warning. Denise stood, reluctant to leave. "I'll be back," she promised. "Take care of yourself," Tank replied. "And that boy of yours." She walked out of the jail with renewed determination. In her car, she checked her phone and found dozens of new messages. More parents wanting to share their stories, reporters requesting interviews, churches offering support and prayers. The truth was spreading, one testimony at a time. Tank's words echoed in her mind. Fight with truth, not hate. She would keep fighting, keep sharing, keep believing. The angels had risked everything to save these children. Now it was her turn to save them. As she drove back to the church, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of hope. Somewhere in the growing darkness, justice was waiting. She just had to keep pushing until they found it. The church came into view, its steeple reaching toward heaven like a prayer. Inside, Malik would be waiting, probably drawing more motorcycles, maybe telling other children about the brave men who had rescued them. Their story wasn't over. It was just beginning to be told. Pastor Wheeler met her at the door. "More calls came in while you were gone," he said. "People want to help. They want to know the truth." Denise squared her shoulders, ready to face another evening of interviews and testimonies. The truth would set them free. All of them. She just had to keep fighting until it did. The Santa Fe courthouse stood like a stern guardian in the morning light. Television vans cluttered the parking lot, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal flowers. Reporters huddled near the entrance, microphones ready, cameras rolling. Denise smoothed Malik's collar as they walked up the granite steps. She'd dressed him in his Sunday best, pressed khakis and a blue button-down shirt that matched her simple church dress. His small hand gripped hers tightly. "Remember what we practiced?" she whispered. "Tell the truth," Malik said, "just like you said." Inside the courtroom, polished wooden benches gleamed under fluorescent lights. Denise led Malik to the front row, where they sat directly behind the defense table. Tank entered in handcuffs, escorted by 2 officers. His orange jumpsuit had been replaced with a borrowed suit that seemed a size too small, making him look uncomfortable and out of place. He caught Denise's eye and managed a slight nod before sitting down. His lawyer, a public defender named Sarah Martinez, arranged papers on the table with quick, nervous movements. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured man named Richard Collins, approached the jury with practiced confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this case is about a dangerous group of vigilantes who took the law into their own hands. These men, these so-called angels, are nothing more than criminals masquerading as heroes." He paced before the jury box, his voice rising. "They broke into private property. They assaulted peaceful citizens. They kidnapped children from their guardians. This is not justice. This is chaos." Denise watched the jurors' faces, her heart sinking as several nodded along. When her turn came to testify, she walked to the witness stand with trembling legs but a straight spine. "Please state your name for the record," the court clerk said. "Denise Marie Carter." "Mrs. Carter," Collins approached, "isn't it true that you enlisted these men to help you kidnap your son from his father?" "No, sir." Denise's voice was clear and strong. "I asked them to help me rescue my son from a man who had stolen him. A man who, as we now know, was working with Mr. Brewer to traffic children." She looked directly at the jury. "These men, Tank and the others, they didn't know me. They didn't know my son. But when they heard a child was in danger, they acted. They protected not just Malik, but all those other children too." Her voice softened. "I saw them pray every morning before we rode. I watched them share their food with hungry kids at truck stops. They're not angels in the holy sense, but they're good men trying to make up for past mistakes by doing right." The children's testimony came next. One by one, they approached the stand, some so small they needed phone books to see over the railing. Their parents sat nearby, offering encouraging smiles. A 10-year-old girl described being locked in a trailer, fed only once a day. An 8-year-old boy told how Tank had carried him to safety when his legs were too weak to run. Malik spoke last, his voice tiny but determined. "The bad man said if I tried to call my mama, he'd hurt her," he said. "But Tank promised to keep us both safe, and he did." The prosecution's case crumbled further when the FBI presented evidence found at the compound. Photos showed cramped trailers with makeshift restraints. Computer records revealed connections to known trafficking networks. Surveillance footage caught Colt Brewer meeting with men now identified as traffickers. Through it all, Tank sat quietly, his head bowed in prayer. When the last piece of evidence was presented, the judge called for a recess before the final arguments and verdict. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and movement. Reporters rushed out to file updates. Parents hugged their children. Lawyers gathered their papers. Denise watched Tank being led away for the break, his shoulders straight despite the handcuffs. Malik tugged at her sleeve. "Mama," he whispered, "did we do good?" She pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his hair. "Yes, baby. We did good. Now we just have to wait." The judge's gavel echoed through the room one final time. Court will reconvene in 1 hour for closing arguments and jury instructions. The waiting had begun, and with it, the weight of knowing that Tank's fate and the fate of all the angels hung in the balance. The fluorescent lights of the courthouse buzzed overhead as people filed back into the courtroom after hours of deliberation. Outside, the sun had long since set, leaving only darkness pressing against the tall windows. Denise's hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. Malik dozed against her shoulder, exhausted from the long day. The jury members entered one by one, their faces unreadable. Tank stood at attention, his borrowed suit jacket pulling tight across his broad shoulders. The room held its breath. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked, his voice cutting through the silence. The forewoman stood, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "We have, Your Honor." "On the count of kidnapping in the first degree, how do you find?" "We find the defendant, Thomas Tank Malone, not guilty." A ripple of movement went through the courtroom. Denise's heart pounded harder. "On the count of assault with a deadly weapon?" "Not guilty." "On the count of criminal trespassing?" "Not guilty." With each declaration, the tension in the room lifted like fog burning away in morning sun. When the final "not guilty" rang out, the courtroom erupted. People jumped to their feet, applauding and cheering. Malik startled awake, blinking in confusion at the commotion. Denise couldn't hold back her tears. They streamed down her face as she watched the bailiff remove Tank's handcuffs. His shoulders sagged with relief, and when he turned, his eyes found hers immediately. In that look was everything they couldn't say: gratitude, humility, and something deeper that made her heart skip. The other angels, who had been acquitted earlier that week, pushed through the crowd to surround their leader. They clapped him on the back, some of them wiping away tears of their own. Reporters swarmed forward, cameras flashing like lightning. Microphones appeared in front of Denise's face as she stood with Malik held protectively against her side. "Mrs. Carter, what's your response to the verdict?" She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The words came from somewhere deep in her heart. "Heroes don't always wear halos," she said clearly. "Sometimes they ride Harleys." The quote would make headlines across the country by morning, but Denise didn't care about that. She only cared that it was over, that justice had prevailed, that Tank was free, that her son was safe. Hours later, they all gathered at May's Diner, a small 24-hour establishment a few blocks from the courthouse. The bell above the door chimed again and again as angels filed in, filling the red vinyl booths and chrome-edged counter seats. The tired waitress perked up at the sight of so many customers, especially when she recognized them from the news. Denise slid into a booth, and Tank settled beside her. Malik sat across from them, already busy with the paper place mat and a handful of crayons the waitress had brought. His small tongue stuck out in concentration as he drew what looked like a line of motorcycles. The diner hummed with quiet conversation and the clink of coffee cups. These men, who had seemed so frightening to Denise just weeks ago, now felt like family. She watched as they ordered pie and coffee, their leather jackets draped over chair backs, their faces relaxed and happy. One of the older angels, a man called Preacher, stood up and raised his coffee mug. The others followed suit, even Malik with his paper cup of chocolate milk. "To Tank," Preacher said, his voice gruff with emotion, "who showed us that redemption ain't just a word in the good book." "To Tank," they echoed, and Tank ducked his head, unused to being the center of such attention. Denise raised her own mug, meeting Tank's eyes over the rim. He'd led them all to grace, her to her son, the angels to their redemption, and himself to freedom. In the warm light of the diner, surrounded by the gentle murmur of voices and the smell of coffee and pie, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Malik pushed his finished drawing across the table. It showed a line of motorcycles, and at the front, a larger bike with 2 riders, one big, one small. Tank smiled at the picture, touching it gently with one weathered finger. "That's real good, little man," he said softly. "Real good." The night stretched on, full of quiet celebration and grateful hearts. Outside, their motorcycles waited in the parking lot, chrome gleaming under the streetlights, no longer symbols of fear, but of salvation. The late summer sun warmed the newly painted office space as Denise arranged brochures on the front desk. The sign outside read, "Faith rides with us," in bold letters, with a smaller tagline underneath, "Hope on 2 wheels." She smiled, remembering how far they'd come in just a few weeks. The nonprofit had started as a dream during those quiet moments after the trial. Now it was real, complete with volunteers, a growing network of supporters, and a mission that gave purpose to both the angels and the communities they served. Through the window, she could see Tank in the parking lot, surrounded by a group of teenagers. He was showing them how to properly check motorcycle brakes, his patience evident in every careful demonstration. These were kids who'd been labeled troubled by their schools, but Tank saw something else in them. Potential, just waiting to be channeled in the right direction. "Mama, look," Malik called from his corner of the office, where he'd set up his own little art station. He held up a drawing of their new logo, a motorcycle with angel wings spreading wide. "That's beautiful, baby," she said, her heart full. The same image now adorned their business cards and website, thanks to a local graphic designer who'd been moved by their story. Later that afternoon, they visited the memorial wall they'd established in the building's courtyard. Simple but powerful, it displayed the names of children who'd been rescued through their growing network. Some names had photos beside them, others just dates and locations. Each one represented a family made whole again. Malik approached the wall with his latest drawing, another winged motorcycle, this one carefully colored with markers. Denise helped him tape it next to the newest set of names. They stood there together, her arm around his shoulders, taking in the meaning of what they'd created. The rumble of motorcycles announced the return of another search team. These weren't the intimidating sounds that had once made Denise clutch her purse tighter. Now they were the sounds of hope arriving. The angels rolled in 2 by 2, their leather vests bearing the new patch, "Faith rides with us," encircling a pair of wings. Watching them dismount, Denise marveled at how God could turn fear into faith, danger into deliverance. These men, once considered outlaws, had become guardians in their own right, real angels doing heaven's work on Harleys. Tank caught her eye as he walked over, his face softening into that quiet smile she'd come to treasure. Together they'd found a way to turn their shared pain into purpose, their past trials into present triumph. The autumn sun painted Atlanta's streets in golden light as crowds gathered for the first annual Faith Rides With Us charity parade. Banners stretched between buildings, fluttering in the gentle breeze. The air buzzed with excitement and the sound of dozens of motorcycles warming up. Denise sat in the front seat of a bright red convertible, her heart overflowing with gratitude. She smoothed her Sunday dress and adjusted the small angel pin on her collar. Beside her, Tank's weathered leather vest bore the patches that told their story. Faith rides with us across the back, with smaller badges marking each successful rescue mission. Malik bounced excitedly on Tank's lap, proudly wearing his own miniature leather vest. The words, "Little Angel," had been carefully stitched across the back in silver thread, a gift from the angels' wives and girlfriends. His small hands gripped the steering wheel, pretending to drive while Tank kept a protective arm around him. The parade route stretched through downtown, past the very motel where Denise had once worked. Church groups lined the sidewalks, holding signs of support. Children waved small flags. Behind their convertible, rows of motorcycles gleamed in the sunlight, their riders representing chapters from across the country. Gospel music flowed from speakers mounted along the street, filling the air with songs of redemption and hope. The familiar lyrics of Amazing Grace brought tears to Denise's eyes as she waved to the cheering crowd. Tank looked over at her, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Told you we'd bring him home?" he said softly, his voice barely audible above the music and cheers. Denise wiped away a tear, her heart full. "You didn't just bring him home?" she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You brought us all home." The crowd erupted in applause as the parade began to move. Dozens of motorcycles roared to life, chrome pipes catching the sun like halos. They rode together into the setting sun, a family forged by faith and strengthened by love, their shadows stretching long across the Georgia asphalt beneath the open sky. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.